Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Katie Earle, and I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're joined here virtually with Linda and Christopher Drajem. Welcome, you two.
Hello, everybody.
Hello there, thanks.
They will be our mother and son speakers today. Just tossing that out there. But we're happy to have them. So before we get started, quickly, we'll go through the regular housekeeping because it looks like we have some new folks. We are recording the session and I'll try to post it on our website in the near future. And if you have any questions for Linda and Christopher as they go through their presentation, feel free to type those in the Q&A panel. So if you're on a computer, you'll find that likely in the lower right-hand side of your screen. You'll see Q&A, expand that, send your questions right to me. And if you're on a tablet or smartphone, touch your screen. That brings up your control panel. Then you'll see a button with 3 dots. Click on that. And there you have your Q&A. So we hope you participate. We'd like to thank the sponsors of our program, which is our Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all of their support. And Senior Services is at 858-8526 if you need anything. All right, now let's introduce our speakers. Linda Drajem is a retired teacher. She taught high school English for over 25 years. After earning a PhD from the University of Buffalo, she taught for 9 years in the English department at Buffalo State College. As a member of a long-standing writing group, she continues to write. She's published in the Buffalo News and some literary journals. She's also written a memoir with her son, which we'll learn about today, so I'll leave that as a surprise. And Christopher Drajem is a recent transplant from Seattle to his new home in Philadelphia, where he teaches an online course for pre-service teachers. He and his husband Patrick are the proud parents of 2 wonderful teenagers, Isabella and Jordan. Christopher and Linda share their thoughts on parenting, religion, gender, and sexuality on the Drajem Family Writers blog. We're so happy you're here and we're able to do it virtually. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
We are really excited to be presenting today. We'll be talking a little bit about our book, Wandering Close to Home, that we co-wrote and that was published in December of 2019. And we're going to talk also a little more broadly about writing in general and specifically around the idea of writing to connect and how Mom and I used writing throughout our lives, and particularly over the last nearly 30 years now, to foster and grow our relationship.
Absolutely. And well, we're both English teachers, and so writing is central to our professional lives as well as our personal lives. So I think we both are great believers in writing, and we think it's a way to clarify your thoughts and to share ideas and concerns and of course connect to others, to family members, to whomever you wish.
I think that a couple of other things that were really important to me in terms of writing, and a couple of points that we'll touch on as we go through the presentation, is that for me as a person, I felt that writing was very helpful in terms of finding my voice, and claiming my voice and coming into my own, both in terms of my sexual orientation and just as a human being in this world. Um, Also, another important aspect of writing for me is the idea that writing is a form of thinking, and that the act of writing can help clarify our thoughts, as Mom already mentioned, and lead us deeper into those thoughts, and help to flesh those out and make them known to us individually and to other people. Um, there's another aspect of writing that is really important and central for both of us. And I think in a lot of ways, it's best reflected by Natalie Goldberg, who writes a lot about the process of writing. And I picked this one quote from her. She's got so many wonderful quotes that I really wanted to include, but I really liked this one. Finally, one just has to shut up, sit down, and write. That is painful. Writing is so simple, basic, and austere. There are no fancy gadgets to make it more attractive. Our monkey minds would much rather discuss our resistances with a friend at a lovely restaurant or go to a therapist to work out our writing blocks. We like to complicate simple tasks. There is a Zen saying, talk when you talk, walk when you walk, and die when you die. Write when you write. Stop battling yourself with guilt, accusations, and strong-arm threats. And one of the reasons that I picked this particular quote from Natalie Goldberg is because it really gets at, for me, a central part of writing and why writing is so important and how it came to be that important of an element in my life. And it goes back a long way. Mom always encouraged my brother and I to write in journals when we were growing up. She helped us write our papers and our essays when we were in school and helped us to think about how to become better writers. And both of us are writers, so there were lots of good lessons that went that we took to heart for sure. But it wasn't until after graduating from college with a degree in English that Mom introduced me, I believe, to Natalie Goldberg. And I just loved the free-spirited nature of what she was saying about writing. And this idea that writing could be something that was pleasurable, that was cathartic, that could exist in the world without being graded or judged. And that felt like such a seismic shift in the way that I thought about writing. And it started to become at that point something that I just realized I couldn't live without, that I had to do in some way or another on a continual basis. Mom, you want to talk about Natalie
Sure.
Goldberg? Or?
Natalie Goldberg, yes, I love Natalie Goldberg. Yes, and while as a reader of literature and as an English teacher, I believed in the value of the written word, and I thought that it was important to write. But it really became so essential after I went to the Western New York Writing Project, when for I think approximately 6 weeks, we teachers sat together and we wrote. And we wrote about ourselves, and we wrote without what Natalie Goldberg calls that editor on your shoulder saying what you're writing is terrible and is awful. We wrote where we were, and then it became just essential, a way of processing so much in life, especially for someone. I think both Christopher and I feel a bit like introverts. It's a way of processing our thoughts and feelings. One of the quotes I always take with me, and it's been ascribed to several different writers. How do I know what I think until I see what I say? And I find that so true. And my writing group, the Women of the Crooked Circle, we've been together for more than 20 years. We all feel that way about the writing, and it has deepened our relationships as friends too.
Great. So we're gonna move into talking about how our writing grew and changed over the years. And one of the places that we'll use to frame our journey is with this book. And it played an important role for us. The title of it is Not Like Other Boys, Growing Up Gay, A Mother and Son Look Back. And it's also written by a mother and son writing team, Marlene Fantaschire and Christopher Shire. And they published this book in 1996. And that was a time when Mom and I were writing a lot of letters to one another. I had moved from Buffalo to Seattle in 1993. And this was way back in the 1900s when there was no such thing as the internet and email. So we were writing actual handwritten letters at that point. And shortly after the book was published, I think it was 1998, I found a copy in the bookstore and I sent it to Mom for Mother's Day and said, us next. Maybe we can write a book. And it took quite a while, but our book, here's a copy of it, did come out, as I mentioned, was published by No Frills Buffalo Press in 2019. And so we're going to give you sort of a peek behind the curtain and talk about how we got from that moment in the mid 1990s when we first thought about this idea of writing a book together up to it being published in 2019. And we start with letters and then move into emails. And as it says here, our letters were, they were chatty. They were like we were sitting down to coffee at the kitchen table and just chatting with one another. Really informal, giving one another kind of just a slice of life in terms of what was happening for us a continent away. And one of the wonderful things about writing letters to one another was that we could share our thoughts whenever we wished. So it wasn't dependent on scheduling a time to talk on the phone, having a Zoom meeting like we might today, or a FaceTime call. Whenever it moved us, whenever we felt like we had something to say or wanted to communicate, we could pull out a piece of paper and dash off a letter. And we've managed to save a bunch of those letters, and it's really kind of astonishing to me the frequency with which we wrote to one another. If one of us received a letter, it seemed like within a couple of weeks at the most, we were writing another letter back. Mom, you want to add anything here about letters?
Well, I think the great thing about letters too, and then eventually emails, is that because we would write long emails to each other, not like today or like texting when you just write a line or two, is that we really probed our thoughts and shared on a very deep level. Christopher's a very thoughtful writer, and he's willing to share. And after he told his father and I in 94, wasn't it? Yeah, that he was gay, he said, well, I'm going back to Seattle, but we can write letters and we can talk on the phone and you can ask whatever you wish. And I did. I asked lots of questions, and he was very open about how he was feeling and how life had been for him growing up. So it was a great way to really see his development as a person, and for each of us to share on a really personal level.
So I just snipped a couple of quick back and forth pieces here from some more recent emails. You'll notice some references to some very recent political events. But I wanted to also go back to some of those early letters and just give a peek at what some of those looked like. I'll read an excerpt from a letter that I wrote in March of 1995. And I'm writing from Seattle, and it's about a year after I had that initial conversation with my parents and came out. Let's see, I'm just gonna figure out here how the best way to read this is. Part of what I want to write about is this whole feeling I have of not wanting to try to describe what being in the closet is all about. It's all too real and painful when you're there. It takes so much effort to hide and pretend and turn away from what you really feel. The disconnectedness is powerful and damaging. None of it can adequately be described, in part because you need to personally experience all of it, in part because once you're on the other side, the joy and relief is too much, too intoxicating and freeing. Yet I will attempt to tell the story and deal with the feelings. It's important. The story of where I've been and why I feel the way I do. My story is important, and it is a happy one, tinged with the tears and pain and guilt and sorrow and insecurity that makes up any human experience. Can I tell you to give up your guilt, to not worry about what you might not have done, to say that your fear of not being there or of damaging me in some way is unfounded? That is my advice for you this week, to let go of it all. I forgive you as if I have the right. If something about what you need to do your best, you did your best. And I think you can see in this some evidence of what Mom was talking about. Really, I'm really here trying to probe some of those experiences that I had and what I was feeling at this time. That was a pretty tumultuous time for me. Learning to live as a young out gay man, and learning to live in honesty with those who loved me and cared for me the most, and thinking about how I was going to do that in a way that felt genuine and important for me. And I chose this excerpt in particularly because it does get at a couple of other things that we're going to move on to talk about, but just this idea of guilt and also of giving advice and what that meant. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as the session goes on. But one of the things that was really important for me here and is also reflected in some of my letter writing from that time was that I was starting to claim my own identity and claim through the writing my voice, and particularly my space in the family. I have a brother who's a year older than me, who's, when I was growing up, was maybe a little more extroverted, a little more outgoing, always seemed to be the life of the party and the center of attention. And there were times when, because I had this secret and because I felt like this part of me was maybe not something to be shared and even a sin according to the religion that I was, the Catholic faith that I was brought up in. I tended to hold back and to not share as much, and so this period of time after I came out was a time when I wanted to put that to the side, and it's in these letters with Mom that I was really starting to be much more honest and share what I was thinking and feeling with her.
I found that to be so true. You know, I learned a lot about Christopher and all of his difficulties growing up and how hard it was. And I did sense that much, that his brother overshadowed him. He's a you know, somewhat of an extrovert and very much the center of attention, or at least he was. And Christopher really, I really saw a change in him. I really saw him claim himself to a great degree, happier, more eager to share. And it was an opening. I saw him opening up as a human being, as a person, and it was so gratifying to see, and made any of the difficulties more bearable, I guess, to say, well, you went through this and I feel terrible that you did, but I'm so glad to hear from you now and hear about all of you. Okay, so you want me to talk about this one? All right. So I was on my own journey. I had gone back to the University of Buffalo, and I was taking courses in, well, first I was in the English department, and then I switched to women's studies, under the American Studies part banner. And as I became more interested in feminism, I began to question my role as a wife, as a daughter to very traditional parents, Italian parents who expected daughters to be a certain way. And so I really had to push against those old roles. And one of the ways I did that was to try to communicate better how I was thinking and feeling. And I really worked on communication skills. You know, I'm an inveterate book reader, so I read books. I went through therapy, and I worked with my husband, with my parents particularly. My sons were off on their own, so that was okay. And they were always encouraging, Christopher especially, with, you know, the path I took, and Mark, of course, too, as well. So so I really worked hard on communication skills. And in this letter, I forgot about this letter until I saw that he sent it. And I didn't realize I went into such detail as to how I worked on the communication skills, you know, using I messages, trying to be calm. Not always easy for me to be calm, and try to push against those old traditional roles that had been inscribed, as you will see in the book, from my 50s childhood. And I felt that it helped. I'm not always successful, but it was helpful.
And I think it's worth saying here and noting that this letter was written in response to actually some relationship issues that I was struggling with at the time. I was in a relationship with a man who I had started seeing maybe a few months before this letter was written, and we were having some troubles with communication. And so I reached out in a letter to my mom about that. And you know, again, it was great to be able to have this kind of back and forth, and to get this wonderful advice, and have that to go back to and to reread. So it's one thing when you're having a conversation with someone, And that can feel really great in that moment. I know I'm often a person who likes to hear things and see things. And so having a letter and being able to read it and reread it, and be reminded and to think again and perhaps think more deeply about something is a treasure, and something to really value and love about sharing thoughts and ideas through writing. One other thing
Mhm.
that I wanted to mention, and Mom, maybe we could just read our own pieces here in this quick little more recent email exchange. Um,
Mhm.
and this, just some background context on this email exchange, is that as Katie mentioned, I have two teenagers, and parenting can have its wonderful moments, but also its challenges. And so we had been going back and forth over email about some struggles that I was having and questions I was having about parenting, and Mom had shared some things, and then this was part of that exchange. Do you want to
Right.
read what you wrote?
Sure. Yes, yes, yes. Um, of course, these are my opinions, and it goes without saying, I hope, that I do not expect my advice to be taken. Whatever you and Patrick decide, I will support in any way I can. Dad will too. We love you and want the best for you and your family.
Thank you. I value and appreciate your perspective. You're right. My gut is telling me something. I agree with all you say 100%, but yes, if I didn't, I would still value hearing from you. I asked what you thought, and you should feel comfortable telling me what you think, even if I don't ask. As long as you don't expect I will always take your advice, which I know you don't, then we're good. And when I was going back and taking a look at some of our email exchanges and in our letters, I kept finding this repeated refrain of looking for advice, seeking advice, offering advice, and encouraging one another that we liked the advice, and we reinforced with one another that it was good to hear advice, um, and that we weren't expecting one another to always follow through and take the advice that was given. And I think that that repeated refrain over the years was just something that was really wonderful about these exchanges that we were having, and something that got us through a couple of stickier situations maybe along the way when we were perhaps giving advice about something or sharing our feelings about something, not sure if we were stepping on one another's toes or making the other person upset. But to be able to say, I'm just going to share this advice, or I'm going to share these feelings, and just know that I still love you through that and that I care about the relationship. All of those things, I think, helped to move our relationship along and helped to keep us close, um, when there were lots of things that were forcing some distance on us, both physical distance and then just the distance of things happening in our own individual lives.
And I think too that the writing of it, if you're just speaking to someone, which is great a way to communicate as well, but not only does the writer have a chance to think a little bit more and probe one's own thoughts a bit more, but the person the respondent can also be more thoughtful. And so, I mean, often surprised when I look back at these letters at how frank we were with each other. And I wonder, if we were just sitting and talking, if we would have been, maybe, of course,
Mhm.
maybe. But as you're writing, you think of something else, and you put that down too. Um, And then I think the sharing of one's feelings it helps to deepen a relationship. Chris, we just had a little family involving other family members, not the two of us, to do, and Christopher and I talked about it, and it was helpful getting his perspective, because when you're in the middle of something that's very disturbing, it's hard to see the bigger picture. So it's always good to have somebody who cares about you and who cares about the other people as well to give you that perspective. So I appreciate that. And we emailed about it as well. So we had both the discussion and the email.
So we'll jump back into this journey here from thinking and imagining this hypothetical book that we were going to write together. And the next sort of aspect that we wanted to talk about was our decision to write a blog. And this came about, of course, with the advent of the internet and the really the shift in publishing and in media that occurred once the internet came along, which basically said, you don't have to be a national well-known columnist or essayist. You don't have to be a famous published writer to get your ideas and opinions out there. If you can put together a website and get your thoughts out on a regular basis, then you're blogging and you can build an audience for your work in any number of ways. And so we decided that this would be some good practice for us as writers, that yes, we did want to write a book, but maybe we should start a little bit smaller and think about how we could practice our writing and have that writing be more formal than just those informal back and forth letters and emails to one another. And have some pieces that we spent a little more time with and thought about who might be interested in some things beyond just the other person. So we're thinking about our audience. If we have something to say and to share, who would that be? Who would we be talking to, and what could we share from our personal experiences and how those experiences made us react to some of the current events or ideas that were sort of percolating at the time. So we started to think about societal issues. We started to think about our experiences in the Catholic Church, growing up in the Catholic Church at different times, but in very sort of formal ways. We both went to many years of Catholic school education, and we started to think about some of the things that were happening in politics and decisions, particularly in the Supreme Court, that were impacting the LGBTQ community. And also, as I was a parent of a young girl and a growing girl, how I was feeling as a male and a dad raising a young girl in a society, and what I wanted to communicate to her about what it meant to be a woman in this society. So so we had a blog and we called it Our Family Matters. And we were writing over time, over a number of years, not so much on a set schedule, but a lot of those blog posts that we wrote took the form of letters. And so we would still address one another, but with the idea that these letters were more open letters, and that even though one particular audience member was that other person, that there were going to be other people who were interested in what we had to say as well. I will just share this one. So this, I can't remember exactly the year that this was written, but this issue of religious freedom laws, and were these laws necessary? And there was, and in fact still is, lots of discussion in society about the need for religious freedom laws. And do we need religious freedom laws, or are the laws that we currently have sufficient to protect people's rights to practice their religion as they see fit? And a lot of this discussion around religious freedom laws came back to issues of sexual orientation, and how individuals of particular religious groups were feeling like they needed more religious freedom laws to protect them, because there were starting to be more decisions in the courts that said, well, you can't discriminate against members of the LGBTQ community. So there was, and again is, lots of discussion about this in society, and we wrote back and forth about this, and this is the beginning of one of my blog posts. Mom, do you want to talk about blogging, and that maybe this particular blog?
Sure. Well, I found the blog really helpful for helping me to come to terms with some of my feelings about our common background as cradle Catholics. And I appreciated your colleague David's feelings about it, the religious freedom laws, and how David was a very committed Christian and belonged to a church, someone who you might look at and say, oh, well, as you said, someone you may have made some assumptions about as maybe being discriminatory. And I felt the same way about the Catholic Church, that after Vatican II, things were so much more opened up about being accepting and loving, and opening up the love of God to everyone, of church to everyone. And then with with Pope Benedict, things just went back, and some horrible things were happening. The treatment of LGBT gay community was horrible. So the blog was a good venue for me to kind of vent my feelings about some of those things. So that was one issue that I blogged about a lot, and I thought it was a way to get those ideas out there, that this doesn't have to be the way religious freedom is. Religious freedom can be inclusive and accepting and loving. So that's, yeah. So the blog was helpful as far as shaping and as far as expressing one's thoughts.
Do you want to talk about this this T for Teacher, T for Trans blog post, or should we move on to talk about the book?
Well, I'll just say one thing about the trans one is that I had a blog post because I became, of course, more open in my classroom after I realized from Christopher that students were sitting in front of me who were gay and lesbian. I wasn't addressing their issues as a teacher. But then when I was teaching at Buffalo State, teaching prospective teachers, I learned, and my teachers learned, about the issue of trans, something that we had no idea, or I didn't anyway, before. And it was a vast societal change. And that was a way to help us learn and to seek assistance in shaping our own way of dealing with these issues. And Christopher had similar issues in your classroom, right, in Bellevue? Yeah, you had
Right.
a trans student who was asking.
Right. I had a number of trans students who were struggling in any number of ways, and were really needing support, and so it was an education for me as well to think about how I could help them and how I could uh, make some changes within the school community to better support those students as well. All right.
Okay.
So
Book.
the book.
Mhm.
So we're writing letters, we're writing emails, we're doing our blog, and as we thought more about the book itself, we thought, well, maybe what we could do, since we have all of this writing already, is just kind of go through and collect some of those letters, pull some of the emails, maybe pull some of those blog entries and weave them together into this book. But once we started to work on that and spent more time thinking about what a book would look like, we realized that it needed to shift a little bit, and we couldn't just rely on those more personal, chatty, informal letters that we had. And that even though we were writing about things that were important to us in the blog, those blog entries were maybe a little more rooted in current events and ideas. And if we were to publish a book, we wanted that to focus more on our individual experiences. And so we started to write this book and watched as the writing of it shifted a little bit over time. One aspect that became central to writing the book was that we always told each other throughout it that we were going to put our relationship with one another before the book itself. So we never wanted the other person to feel like they were being pushed too far out of their comfort zone. I say too far because writing a book, particularly a memoir, you do have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. But we didn't want to push one another too far, and we didn't want to do anything that was going to harm our relationship, because that's really what brought us to writing the book, and we wanted to keep that at the center.
Right. Well, at first, when Christopher talked about it, I said, "Oh, we'll just take these letters and emails and just, we got a book. We got it. It's done. We're all set." I thought, oh, that would be cool. Well, then, of course, as he said, as it evolved and we journaled on various issues, and as we thought more deeply and got a little advice, we realized that was not going to work, that they might be resources for us, but we actually had to do some writing. And interesting conversation we had, I had with Christopher's friend, Diane, who visited us a few days ago. She had read an earlier version, and she said to me, "You didn't really want to express your deepest feelings at first." She said, "I kept wanting to hear your voice, and this was going on." You said, "Oh, this was going on, but how did you feel about that?" I said, "I know, Diane, you really pushed me." So Christopher's right. If you're writing a memoir, if you're going to do it, you have to be honest, and it is kind of like standing on, at a crosswalk and taking all your clothes off. Horrible thought that would be. Everyone else. But you really do have to push yourself, and that there were parts that were difficult for me to write, but I found that if you're going to be honest, you have to do it. And I was inspired because Christopher wrote about some aspects, especially of his early experiences, that were heart-shattering to me as a mom. And he was so honest. I said, well, I have to be honest too. So that is part of writing a memoir. But yes, we always did reassure each other. A relationship's more important than a book. So that's.
So I just took a couple of snippets here from different the beginnings of a few different chapters, and you'll see that we did keep some excerpts from letters in there. They show up both at the start of some of the chapters and then throughout some of the chapters, that just took us back to this idea that communication and writing to one another was something that was really important and really helped to center our relationship. We also had a chapter that was a letter that my dad wrote to me in 2014, and that chapter was that whole letter that my dad agreed could be in the book. And then there was another chapter that was a letter that my brother wrote to me as well. And so their voices, important voices in our family, ended up being woven into the book as well. And then one of the things that was really important to me, and I hope that it was important to Mom too eventually, although I know this did push her out of her comfort zone, was really making sure that the book was about her experience and was reflective of her own growth. Because as we continue to work on the book, it became really clear to me that the book shouldn't just be about my coming out, but it should be more about our relationship and how we were there for one another over a number of years, as each of us was sort of growing and changing and struggling with some aspects of our identity. And so I really felt like I needed to hear more of Mom's voice, as my friend Diane said, but also more of her story, and for her to share not only with me but with readers about what it was like for her growing up at the time that she grew up, in the place that she grew up, in the religion that she was raised in, and knowing how those things impacted her and how they brought her to the place where she felt that she needed to push against some of those things and embrace her. I don't know. Well, Mom, maybe you should say it. What did you embrace?
Yes, to really look fully at past and try to come to terms with it in some sense. And yeah, think stories that I think I would never tell anyone, that I don't even know if I told my sons how I probably touched on it, about my mother's illnesses. I mean, I think I touched it, but I don't know if I ever really probed how it affected me, other than maybe my sister. My sister would be a confidant. And it was interesting. A friend's daughter read the book recently, and she sent me an email and said, you know, when you're, because we knew each other, I knew her when she was a baby, you know, so I watched her grow up, and she and my son have been friends. And she said, you know, when you're growing up and you look at adults, you think, oh, they're always like this, and they always had this kind of life. And she said, I was so surprised to learn of some of the challenges you had to deal with. And I think that's true for all of us humans on the earth, that there are challenges we all have to deal with. So yes, that was a little bit of a pushing out of my comfort zone. And listening to Christopher's stories and his anger, I mean, his very justifiable anger, that I thought was part of the process.
And so I think, you know, the mom mentioned this already, but being encouraged, we encouraged one another to share these truths that might have been a little bit hard for the other person to hear. And we shared stories that we had never told anyone, and that we never imagined we would tell even each other,
Right.
let alone publish in a book. And yet those things, both of those things, both encouraging one another to speak hard truths and to share stories that were a part of our lives, did bring us to a new level of connectedness, and help to maintain our relationship with one another, and to have it go to a new, deeper level, as we put the finishing touches on the book. We wanted to share a few writing prompts with you, since this is a session about writing to connect, and you may think that this process could only occur between the two of us. That is not true. We want to make sure that you have some tools to think about relationships with maybe your son or daughter, parent, close friend, and want to think about how you could develop that relationship and work towards more connection, deeper connection with that person. There are some ideas here to think about doing your own writing around, or maybe posing them to that important person in your life and saying, hey, do you want to write about this, and read what I have to say about it. So just asking those individuals what they, or thinking for yourself what you value most about that other person, and sharing that. It's always nice to hear what somebody values in you, so it'd be nice to for somebody else to hear that. What would you like that person to know about you? And this is a place where you could perhaps share something with them that you've never shared before. What would you like to know more about in how their youth shaped them? Are there stories that maybe have not been told, that you would like to hear? And again, for your own life, what are some of those stories that you haven't told, or maybe just want to tell again and commit to paper? And thinking about I statements around thorny issues, using that kind of language. There's also the opportunity to think and write about maybe some of those places where there is tension or disagreement, and how you might shape some of your thoughts around that in a way that might, through writing, be a better way to communicate them. So those are just some ideas. We are sharing a couple of books here that are our favorites. And again, 2 texts by Natalie Goldberg, who really influenced us. And then Mary Carr was another writer that we really loved, who really helped us to think about memoir, but not just about writing your own memoir that you intend to get published, but maybe more about just doing personal writing and how that can be impactful. And we want to leave some time for questions.
I just want to say one thing about memoir. Mary Carr's book is great, and there have been an explosion of memoirs in last several years, and I know some friends have written memoirs, and oftentimes older people like myself, it is important to leave some stories, even if it's just for a member of the family, of how it was for you growing up. So I just want a little plug there for writing your own story in some form. Anyway, yes, questions. Any questions?
Thank you both. Yes, we have a couple questions here, but I want to thank you for that presentation, walking us through all of those intimate details of your process.
You're welcome.
You are welcome. Our pleasure.
This first question, and Linda, you briefly touched on it, but this person's wondering, were you more open in the letters than you would have been in person?
That's an excellent question. I would say I was. Yes, I would say so. I was more open in the letters. Right. And I think it gave me a chance to really probe my own thoughts and to express it more clearly, I would say. Sometimes when you're in a personal discussion, the emotions, can cloud how you say something. So I would say so. I don't know. What do you think, Christopher?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was probably much more personal than I might have been, and there's all sorts of reasons for that, right? There's just the circumstances of when we might have had the opportunity to talk about those things. Lots of our visits were consumed with other people, or just with the details of life, or maybe where we were traveling and what we were seeing together. And so the letters presented an opportunity where we could delve into things that just don't normally come up in conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, family visits are wonderful, but they're consumed with, and especially with children around, you really want to focus on the children.
That makes sense. Thank you both.
Uh-huh.
The next one is, what advice can you give to people who may not have a close relationship now, but would like to develop one through writing?
Ooh.
That's a great
That's a great
question.
A great question. Yes. A
I
great
mean, I
question.
think there's always value in cataloging and writing about, in thinking through your own experiences and your own thoughts. And so it's always appropriate to get your ideas down. Again, writing as thinking, and writing as claiming your voice. And so, you know, write, and then you can go back and look through and maybe share some of that writing at a later point. If there is a relationship where you think, oh, you know, this person's experiencing something that I know I went through before, maybe this is a time where I can share something from that particular time.
Yes, I think it's good to write it all out first and then maybe select. And also be prepared for the fact that the other person may not wish to explore things in writing. I've had that experience with family members that was not a desired way to process information, process feelings. So just prepare yourself for that.
Okay, that's good advice. Thank you both. We're at time here, but I'm just seeing 2 more questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
That's great.
Okay,
Yep.
awesome.
Mhm.
This next one is, what did you learn about yourselves throughout the process that you're willing to share?
Mm. Well, I think I learned that there's some things I don't want to talk about. Thought I was an open book, but and I had to push myself a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I learned so much about myself throughout the process, so it's almost hard to narrow it down. But one thing that I alluded to before was this idea of sharing stories, particularly in the book, that I never thought that I would tell anyone, and let alone again publish it in a book. And so that experience actually of doing that was very freeing, and was something that I I did get a certain amount of, I don't know if power is the right word, but a certain amount of release or freedom to say, yes, this was a part of my experience. This was something that I did or that happened to me, and that's okay. It's a part of who I am. It doesn't define me completely. Um, and I can say it and I can claim it as what it was, and then and know that it's just this little piece of who I am.
I would say that's certainly really powerful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thank you both. This last question here is, Christopher and Linda, would you speak to a group, RSVP, Rainbow Seniors Visible and Proud? And do you have contact info that you're willing to share to set something up?
Yes.
Yes, unequivocally, yes. We will definitely talk to that group. We would love it.
Love it. Yeah. Uh,
You
uh,
can, one of the easiest ways to reach out to us is through our website, and it's just our last name, Drajem, Drajem.com. And there's a way to send us a message through the website. Or Katie, is it possible for you to pass along an email, or what's the best way to do that?
I can pass along the website to this person, no problem.
Okay, great.
and
And
anyone can contact us through the Drajum Family Writers website, right, Christopher?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
easiest way.
Very happy to speak to a group and to speak personally if you want.
right. I'll pass that information along when we're done here. And
Okay.
this comment just came through. With the memoir, you're dealing with the past, but also with the now. You will both have more nows. I'm glad you shared your stories, but hope you will share more. Maybe more family voices will enter the story. Thanks for this. You're both great.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do hope for more voices in the family to enter into the conversation. My daughter this week is working on her senior project, which is an essay about moving from Seattle to Philadelphia during the pandemic. So who knows, maybe a portion of that will end up on our blog at some point soon.
Yes.
Wow. Well, with that, I'm just seeing more thank yous. Thank you for sharing your story. Thanks for this great presentation. So I can't thank you both enough. And everyone who's on, thank you and enjoy the rest of your
All
day.
right. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Katie.
everybody. Thanks, Katie.